In the next part of this chair modeling tutorial, we're going to take a look at modeling the cushion component of this chair. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to remove this and let's turn off the chair components. In fact, let's look at the chair really quick. You can see it's got this angle and I've got a couple of profiles set up that are going to guide us in the process. So when I turn this off and I turn on the profiles, I've got that line there. And when we look at this from the right side, I've got this profile drawn. So I've got the 3D cursor right in the middle. Let's do Shift and A and add a plane. Let's align that to the view. Let's go into wireframe mode. And I've got it set up so that we have random colors, which is really just going to help us in the modeling process. So let's go ahead and close that, Command A, and we're going to apply rotation. Press the Tab key, S key, Z key, and we're just going to roughly conform it. It doesn't need to be super close. Let's come in and I'll add one cross section there in the middle. And then we want to come over, now that we're in vertex mode, we're in polygon edit mode, let's use the tweak function, tweak selection mode, so that we can really roughly, crudely get this matched up to the template like that. Then we're going to come back over here to the loop cut. Now let me just talk about this for a second. I've had some people say, Chris, why don't you use keyboard commands more often? Well, I do use keyboard commands, but sometimes you get slightly different functionality depending on whether you directly select the tool or whether you issue it by a keyboard command. So let me give you an example here. If I press Command R, we go right into the loop select function, but it behaves differently in a way that I don't really like. If I click it, then and release the mouse button, it still keeps trying to slide, and I don't like that behavior. Whereas if I directly select it with the tool, its mouse over behavior is a little bit differently, and I can just quickly click to issue a 50% insertion point. And I can do the same thing over here, and I can move the mouse around. It behaves in a way that I like better by selecting it via the icon. So there's a time for both, but in this case, I'm doing it via the icon. So let's come back over to the Move tool. And in fact, let's just kind of move these up roughly. And then let's come back over again and add one more cut for each of these. In fact, I'm going to do one more right there, and I'll do one more down here. And then let's just come back in and again get these conformed roughly to my template. Move that up. So I really like the tweak mode for just how easy it makes it to quickly position things in one click. Okay. Let's come back over now and add cross sections this way. And in fact, I think I'm going to press the 2 key to go into edge mode, double click, GG, and we're going to slide that one over. And I'm just going to GG, slide that one over just a little bit to redistribute those. 1 key, and then I can just come in and further do little bits of alignment to bring these closer to my template. And I think those are looking pretty good. Let's do 2 key, GG. Slide that just a little bit. Okay. Now, I'm not worrying about the bottom quite as much. It's going to be underneath and seen, so it's close enough that way. One thing that I want to do is pay a little bit more close attention to here. So I'm going to press the K key. Here, hold the Shift key, click, right click, Shift key to come to the center, and then back to this anchor point and return. And then I can move these to give myself a little bit better resolution. Let's do the same thing down here. K key, click, click, right click, come to the center, and then here and return. And then we just grab these and move them like that. I want to see what the contour of my subdivided geometry is. I've just got a very crude representation of the cage, So we're going to come over, and in fact, let me rename this. We'll call this cushion so it's really clear what that is. Let's add a subdivision modifier. And there you can see that. In fact, I'm going to take it up to a value of 3, so it's really quite accurate. And we can come in and, again, move all of these points, but it starts to get, for detail purposes, a little bit awkward to work with when you've got the lines and the points and the actual subdivided mesh. So I'm going to come over and click this little icon here on cage, and it will allow us to operate on the subdivided points, not the cage. And then you can see how I can just grab and do much more subtle adjustments. So for instance, down here, by clicking that point in tweak mode, like that. So this is really, really nice to be able to operate directly on the subdivided geometry. And everything else looks pretty good. I mean, it's going to be close enough. Okay. So let's go ahead, and I'm not going to worry about this too much. That'll become apparent later in the tutorial why this being a little bit more crude is going to work just fine. Let's turn that off, and let's temporarily disable subdivision surfaces so we're working back with the cage. And I think that's pretty good to a point that's going to work for us. Let's come in now and give it some actual 3D thickness. So I'm going to come into face mode, and I want to actually leave polygon edit mode temporarily. Shift and S, cursor to world origin. So I'm operating, I tend to like to model at that very center point. Come up to object, set origin to 3D cursor, and then tab takes us back into edit mode, A key, and then E key. We're going to, it pretty much intelligently guesses that we want to move perpendicular along the normal of all those polygons, which is smart. So click at any point, press the period key, and let's relocate the pivot to the bounding box center. Now when we look at that in the top view, being that it's flat, we can take all of those numerically and just position them to 0. Now, the reason I moved the object's origin to that position is because these values are relative to the object's origin. Let's come over, let's do this in vertex mode. Oh, see, I made a mistake. I'm in tweak mode, and I thought I could marquee. You can't marquee select in tweak mode. So let's come back over to select box, marquee around these. I'm noting that I'm in X-ray mode, so it would select all the way through, which is what I want. So let's come in and move this GX so that it comes basically right to the center. My eye is looking right down here, and I'm going to select that farthest point, Shift and S, and do cursor to selected. And then let's reselect all of these. We want to switch over now to the shear tool, but we need it to operate at that 3D cursor location. So press the period key and then go to 3D cursor. You can grab this, and then we can skew this until it conforms pretty closely to that template line. And then just come back to the move tool, and there we go. Let's switch over into face mode. I'm in select box, so I can marquee around those. I don't need those. X key, we're going to delete those faces. Then let's switch back over, Option Z, to go out of X-ray, and let's do loop cuts. Click, click, click. And again, that worked better by directly selecting the icon than if I had pressed Command R. So actually, let's do one more. I'm going to do one more right there. Okay. So what we want to do now is we've gotten the basic geometry in place that we want to begin forming this using a lattice. The first thing that I want to do is get the pivot to the center of everything. So I'm going to press A key and then period key, and we're going to send the pivot to the bounding box center of our selection. And then we can do a Shift S, invoke cursor to selected, and then when I come to the right view, tab to leave edit mode, I can do a Shift A to add a lattice. It's going to be pretty big. That's okay. Press the S key and let's just scale that down. until it gets roughly to the size, and then S key and then Z, and we'll get that pretty close. It doesn't have to be exact. Come back to the front, S key, X, and get it pretty close again. But in this case, I don't want it to encompass the symmetry points. So G, X, and pull it over about like that. S, X, and we'll scale it. G, and that'll work pretty well. We need to change the resolution of the lattice. So let's come down to the lattice of data here, and let's do 4 by 4 by 4, and then sort of examine it. And I think maybe along this way and along this way, we need a little bit more resolution. So let's do U of 5. It's not really obvious, honestly, UVW, what those are, so you just have to experiment. And then this direction, let's do 7. That gives us a little bit more resolution. So if we come back here and turn on the original chair geometry, we see that we've gotten it to conform to this angle, but there needs to be a little bit of curvature this way, and there needs to be curvature this way. So this is where the lattice is going to help us to impart some of this more subtle topology. Let's turn off all the chair parts. We need to actually tell the lattice to interact with the mesh now. So come over and select the mesh that we're working on. Come over to modifiers, and we need to add a modifier to it. Under deform, we'll see a lattice here too. This tells the mesh to attach itself to the lattice. I'm going to move it up to the top, and we select that lattice object. And now when we modify the lattice, it'll affect the mesh. So let's select the lattice. Tab key takes us into edit mode. And the good thing is you can do a marquee select, and it'll go all the way through for a lattice regardless of whether you're in X-ray mode or not. So let's do this. Let's define sort of a curvature at the top. I'm going to grab these and move these down kind of like this. Just sort of pull those down. In fact, this one maybe I'll pull up ever so slightly so that we've just gotten this basic sort of curvature coming down about like that. These are the kind of things that are up to your artistic discretion. Down here, I'm going to take this one, maybe pull that one up just a little bit. The bottom isn't quite as crucial. Okay, so now we'll come around and we'll maybe kind of try and create the curvature this way. So in the front, we're going to reselect these here, and we'll pull these in to be about like that. And on the bottom, we'll come in about like that. So we've got kind of that curvature right there. Let's come into the top view and let's look at this corner. So I'm going to marquee around all of these because I want this corner to sort of come in. This is one of the things that lattices like this are so great at. Just take that corner and bring that in so it kind of comes forward like that. Let's come in and take this. I'm going to form a little bit more curvature to sort of this front area like that. Just a little bit of taper. So we're looking down on it now. Okay, so there we go. So these are fun things that you can play with and tweak to your artistic discretion to get that cushion forming a little bit more. What I want on the back is I don't want the back to be tapered. I want the back to sort of more come straight like that. So I'm going to take this point, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we will take these points at the back and we're going to reset those. Period key to 3D cursor, set the pivot point there, S, Z, and then 0. And we'll do the same thing for the next row. S, Z, 0. And that will just make it so that the back is straight and it only sort of tapers in the front. Okay. That works pretty well. Let's go ahead and consider that good. So I'm leaving edit mode and I want to come to the mesh itself, come back over here to the lattice, and we're going to specifically apply the lattice. Then we can hide the lattice object itself, and there is the cushion that's ready for the next level of editing. Let's jump back into edit mode. Now we're going to switch over into Edge and we're going to add some details. I'm going to select these major corner points. So think about the cushion is composed probably of a piece of fabric here, piece of fabric in the front, probably one that can go all the way around, piece of fabric on the side with the cushion in between. So that's what we kind of want to simulate now. And I'm selecting all of these components. Now I know there's actually a command for selecting hard edges, boundaries, but I just wanted to make sure I selected just what I wanted to select. Let's come in and zoom into this corner. We're going to switch over now to active tool so we can operate on the selection directly. And we're now going to use the bevel tool. We want to make sure it's in a 2.5 configuration, which is a little bit more unusual than what I typically do, where when we're doing a hard body modeling, we put boundary loops in and we typically would set shape to 1. But in this case, we don't want to do that because we're not really doing a hard body model. We're doing a soft body model. So we're not trying to impose rigidity to the surface. So in this case, 0.5 shape will round this even more. Click, hold, and drag and pull out until we get, oh, I don't know, something about like that. Now we're going to zoom down. Let's reselect these original corners. Get all of these. There we go. This is why I said we weren't going to worry too much about trying to match up the back exactly, because I knew we were going to be putting in all of these polygons that would constrain it. So now we need to indent it a little bit, as if the fabric comes down and it's being stitched in some way to the other pieces of fabric, but we don't need to model it quite that precisely. We just wanted to indent a little bit to give that appearance. So in this case, we're now going to come back and turn on our subdivision surfaces. And again, I want to come back into this on cage mode so that we can see this happening interactively. Let's come down now to the shrink fatten function. And what this will do is move these selected edges along their normal directions. Each edge will move along its own normal direction. So again, we're an active tool, so we can grab any of these, click, hold, and drag, and then we can sort of push that down like that. Get it down about that far. I think that'll work pretty well. But now we want this to be a little bit more defined. You see here in this profile how it's kind of curving like that. So we're going to come over and we're going to change the creasing. So let's change the crease value to 0.5. You can see how that brings that in. Let's do it just a little bit more. Let's do 0.7, just a little bit more. And I think that works pretty well. Let's switch over into like a shaded mode. In fact, tab key, let's go to shade auto smooth. Let's come back into tab. We can look at that and we can determine if we want to do any more forming. So I think what I would like to do is take this loop, and in fact, I'm going to hold the shift key and deselect these, and I'm going to slide these back just a little bit. This is very common. You'll end up doing this forming work, GG, and we'll pull that back a little bit. We can do the same thing here, hold the shift key, GG, we'll sort of pull that back, and then we'll do the same thing here. But in this case, it's going down a little bit too far, and it's coming down into this area, and I don't want that to happen. So I'll select this edge, come over to this side, hold the control key, and that will do a loop select between, and then GG. In fact, let's do this. We can sort of see the contour, GG. We can sort of pull that back. So that's what I like. Subdivision surfaces can be really malleable, and I think we're just going to call that good. Now let's leave edit mode and let's come over and take a look at, I've actually over exaggerated it a little bit. In my final model, this isn't quite so exaggerated, but I'm exaggerating it just a little bit so that you really can kind of see what's going on. Let's take a look here and down here. So let's come back into edit mode. So I mentioned in another tutorial that there is a variant of the Catmull-Clark subdivision routine that handles areas like this a little bit better that handle triangles. Blender doesn't have it, so we have to go to a little bit of effort to deal with this. Let's come back and turn off that on cage. So we've got a triangle, a quad, and a triangle. We're going to come over and just dissolve those edges and then leave edit mode. And you can see that it's better. It's still not absolutely perfect. But again, this is a very organic model, and we're going to be having a texture on top of it that you're not going to notice any slight irregularity. But I want to bring this to your attention that, in fact, we have an n-gon right here. And some people will say you can never, ever, ever have an n-gon in a subdivision surface model. You should always have quads, and that's not the case. Sometimes leaving an n-gon in like this actually will return a little bit better result. And it's something I'm not going to stress about. So let's do the same thing up here. We're going to take these and dissolve. And then you can see that that's a little bit better than what we had before. There's still a little bit of something going on, but again, this is a very organic model, and it'll be absorbed into the whole visual. Now we just need to sort of come in and add a mirror, and there we go. So now we've gotten that basically in place and ready for UV mapping. This is where you can come in and you can look at it and determine if you want to do any minor amounts of molding to the shape or changing of the shape. For instance, if I were to come in, this is where we could very easily, say, come into vertex mode and do a little bit. Need to be in select box. You could do just a hair bit of molding of the shape, period key, come to the bounding box center, and you could tweak all of this to form it just a little bit. In fact, I think right here, I'm going to take this loop GG. You see, I'm going to pull that over to distribute that just a little bit more, and tab key. So those are the fun things that I like to do. I like to go through and I get it, sculpt it, and now we're ready for the UV mapping process and the texturing process.